Well, great. Thank you so much. I am so honored and so happy to introduce you one of very special a person for us, for Team NCN, that she also she do a lot for making possible the Millennium Fellowship. So Susan Finegan, thank you so much for being with us today. This is a very special webinar for us. She's an amazing advocating for social impact, and she worked pro bono and has supported a lot of to MCN. So thank you so much for being here with us today. Susan, can you please share with us a little bit more of your work? We are willing to learn a lot of you today, and thank you.
Great, thank you so much. And thank you for hosting me today. It's really wonderful to see everyone from around the world. And for some of you, it's the middle of the night. So really incredible that you're joining in. I just want to give thanks to MCN and the United Nations Academic Impact for launching these incredible Millennium Fellowships. I've been working with MCN as a pro bono partner of yours, helping with legal advice for many, many years. And it's just great to be here with all of you. You're all so impressive. And I look forward to having a great dialogue with you. I thought I'd spend my time today talking a little bit about my background and how I ended up where I am now. And I thought I would also talk to you a little bit about some of the pro bono work that I've been able to work on throughout the years. And I've been really lucky over the past 15 years or so to really work full time in working on free legal services for low income people in different areas of the law. But at the same time, be at a big law firm with a lot of its resources to bring to bear on a lot of these issues. So I thought I'd just start by telling you a little bit about my background, going way back when, even before law school, when I was in undergrad and after. I started doing a lot of volunteer work, and I was working a lot with the homeless population in both Boston and in New York. And I also worked a lot with people with disabilities. During law school, I got really involved in what's called pro bono work, which is providing free legal work for low-income clients. And I really focused a lot on immigration work and working with political asylum cases. And I just really loved it. It was really fulfilling. The clients were amazing from around the world. And the attorneys that I was assigned to work with were also amazing. So I really knew that once I started my legal career, I really wanted to get involved in working on political asylum cases and hopefully working in immigration generally. After law school, I did what's called a legal clerkship with a couple of different judges in Massachusetts, which was also an amazing experience to really get to know judges and how they operated and how they made decisions. And then I had to make the decision of what to do next. How do I start my legal career? And I thought I was going to do, all throughout law school, I thought I was going to do public interest law or work in the public sector. But I decided to take a job in a law firm where I thought I could do a lot of pro bono work. The reason being because it was a great law firm. I could do a lot of pro bono work, but I also had a lot of loans from my undergraduate college and also from my law school. So I decided to go to the law firm. I learned a ton at the law firm, working for paid clients mostly, but also doing pro bono work as well. I did that for about 10 years as an associate and then a partner. And then I was able to translate all that pro bono work that I had done into my second job, which was being the legal director at an NGO that focused on helping sexual assault survivors. And that was really amazing. It was a small group of all women, and we were helping mostly young people who had been sexually assaulted and just helping them with a bunch of different areas of law. The firm then asked me to come back in 2007 as what's called the Pro Bono Partner, which is something that didn't exist, 20 years ago or so. But they kind of created this job where I'd come back to the firm as a partner level person in litigation, that I would chair the pro bono committee, and that I would work exclusively on doing this pro bono work for low-income people. And so part of my job right now is I work on overseeing all the pro bono work for my law firm. We have 8 different offices throughout the country in the United States, and we have about 300 or 400 matters, individual matters that are going on at any given time. So I help kind of oversee the project overall. And then I also serve as the chair of the firm's pro bono committee, which kind of takes in various matters for the firm. And I also get to work on a lot of cases. So I have about 10 or 15 cases that I work on at a given time. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about those in a few minutes, because I think that it's rather interesting, and hopefully you have lots of questions. And I've loved doing this work, and hopefully my enthusiasm will come through. So in addition to working at the firm, I've done a lot of volunteer work sort of on the side. And so a couple of the things that I've worked on is I chaired a committee for the Supreme Court of the state that focused on encouraging people to do pro bono work. And then I also worked for 10 years as a member and then a co-chair of what's called the Access to Justice Commission. And if I have time, I'll tell you a little bit about that too. And then for 30 years or so, I've been an alumni volunteer for Dartmouth College, which is a university in New Hampshire here in the States. And I'm currently serving as a member of the Board of Trustees, which has really been an honor. Also challenging during this COVID time, to run an institution of higher education. And I know you're all at higher education universities right now, and you've seen it from the student perspective. So I can definitely tell you from a board of trustee perspective, it's also been challenging too. So I thought for the remainder of my time, I thought I'd talk a bit about my personal pro bono work that I've been able to work on. And I'm going to categorize them into 3 buckets. One is gender violence. The second is immigration. And the third is really a broader category of human rights or civil rights. If I have time, I'll talk about some of the systemic work I've done on the commission, Access to Justice Commission too. So in the category of gender violence, I really started working on, I guess I'll back up. When I was in college, I was a government political science major, and I took a lot of classes on gender inequity in our legal system. And so I was really interested in that in undergrad and then in law school. And so when I had the opportunity to work at the law firm, I really took very seriously, working in pro bono for survivors of domestic violence. Later, I started working a lot with sexual assault survivors, and then more recently working with survivors of human trafficking. And over the years, I've been able to represent hundreds of survivors, with different legal needs, and also work with a lot of the domestic violence shelters and rape crisis centers. And a lot of them have legal needs. And so just helping them with their legal needs. I've also done a lot of appellate advocacy, which is writing briefs on appeals that have broader impact than just representing individuals, both in the Massachusetts appellate system, but also at the U.S. Supreme Court, writing briefs on behalf of national organizations that work with domestic violence survivors. So I did this work for the firm for my first 10 years, and working with a lot of different survivors, mostly helping them with what's called restraining orders, helping them in court, trying to get protection from their abuser so that the abuser would stop abusing them. And I did a lot of that work. And then I worked a lot with this organization that I then went to become the legal director, working with survivors of sexual assault. Like I said, I loved that work. And it was really, really wonderful to sort of be at the ground level at a new organization, trying to develop all kinds of different ways to help people who were sexually assaulted. One of the things that I worked on, which is a little bit different and something that spanned both my time at the law firm and also the NGO that I was working for, was developing a whole new law for people who were sexually assaulted to obtain that kind of protective order that I talked about for domestic violence survivors. At the time, the law in Massachusetts, there was a huge gap because you could definitely get a restraining order or a protective order if you were a survivor of domestic violence. So if your spouse abused you, or if your boyfriend abused you, or girlfriend, or if you lived with someone. But if you did not fall in those categories, you couldn't get protection from the courts. And so I worked with a first-year associate who came to me and said, I'm so frustrated. I have a client who's 16 years old who was raped by some neighborhood boys. I cannot get her protection, and I'd like to change the law. And so I worked with her over the course of 10 years. She was no longer like a junior lawyer, but she then was more of a senior lawyer. And we worked with a lot of different advocates throughout Massachusetts, and we were able to pass a law that now has served as a protection for those who have been stalked or raped or harassed by people who wouldn't have fallen in the categories of people who had been protected before. So that was kind of amazing. And it was kind of a great lesson for me that there really are many ways that you can help people. You can help people individually. You can help people, like I mentioned, with appeals. But you can also change laws and really make an impact for people going forward. So that was really, it's kind of one of those moments. We went to the bill signing at the State House in Massachusetts, and I walked back to my firm and I was telling someone like this is why I became a lawyer. I became a lawyer to really make a difference, and hopefully we'll be able to really help people going forward. So, and it was all really due to the enthusiasm of someone who had just gotten out of law school, like who wasn't fearful about going and trying to change the law at all. So I kind of, when she first came to me, I said, yeah. I kind of laughed in some ways, like, oh, we'll never get that done. But then we worked on it for 10 years and we were able to get it done. So it's pretty incredible. The second bucket of cases involved immigration cases. And like I mentioned, I started working on these kind of cases in law school. And what I realized that as a lawyer, you don't often get a chance to potentially save someone's life, but working on these political asylum cases where people were coming from different countries and had been, either politically active or tortured or imprisoned, and then they came to the United States seeking refuge, you really could, as a lawyer, save someone's life. And so I've continued to work individually with clients from around the world who are seeking refuge here in the United States. And then I've also worked on some interesting, bigger cases, such as serving as lead counsel in Boston on the challenge. Some of you may recall when President Trump first went into office, he initiated a travel ban and was not allowing certain individuals to come into the country. And so that was during his first week in office. And so I remember getting calls from advocates on Friday and Saturday saying, like, once people start coming in internationally into Boston, we're going to file a lawsuit. So we're going to call you. And so on Saturday night at like 8:30 at night, I got the call saying that the first plane had landed and that they were detaining people and weren't letting people in. And so we ended up going, I was at an event that night and ended up going to the airport where there were all these protests happening. And then we eventually ended up in federal district court that night. And by 2 or 3 a.m., we finally got a decision from the court saying that we had won, at least temporarily, and that planes were allowed to land. And a lot of people from around the world are actually coming in through Boston because while there were other lawsuits filed in other cities, the one in Boston, the one in Massachusetts, was a pretty liberal and broad order. And so a lot of people were trying to fly in through Boston to come into the country at that time. I've also worked in a couple of other big cases involving the detention of immigrants in our country. One we recently won, which involved, when the government is putting someone into detention while their case is proceeding, basically without putting someone in jail without having any criminal record, for example, and you could just sit there for months. And what we did was we basically said that the way the government was handling those cases was unconstitutional, and we were able to get a judge to go along with us. So that involved all the people who were detained in the New England area, the 6 states in the Northeast of the United States. So that was exciting. That case is making its way up through the court system, but it was exciting to be a part of that, and then to help a lot of the people who are in detention get out of detention. A year and a half ago, before the pandemic, I was able to spend a week down on the border of Texas and Mexico at the largest detention facility for women and children who were being detained. Most of the women and children had come from various countries in South America and Central America. And I continued to work with that legal team that was on the ground there after I came back from that experience, which I can talk about later if anyone's interested in hearing about it. But it was a pretty depressing week, I have to say. And it was probably my worst week as a lawyer, because I really felt very powerless and sort of part of a system where it was very hard to make an impact and make a difference, even though we were trying to do so. So I can talk about that if people are interested, but it's that issue of how we're treating individuals at the border still it haunts me, and it's still something that needs a lot of attention. Even under this new administration, it really hasn't changed that much. And then most recently, I recently recruited over 100 lawyers and staff throughout my firm to work with hundreds of Afghan refugees who are stranded in Afghanistan or in other countries to apply for various immigration forms of relief here in the United States. And so I can talk about that if people are interested too. But that's been, it was really heartwarming, because I thought people were super busy at their jobs, and I didn't think anyone was going to be able to volunteer. So I had very low expectations that I was going to get any volunteers. But then 10% of the firm raised their hand to help, which it was really heartwarming and pretty amazing, actually. And people are still working on those cases right now. Just a couple of things about human rights and civil rights kind of cases that I've worked on. Over the past couple of years, I've been able to work on a few what's called an amicus brief to the U.S. Supreme Court. And those are briefs that are called friend of the court briefs. And so you're just alerting the court to different aspects of the case that perhaps the parties to the case, the lawsuit, hadn't highlighted. And so one of those examples is there was a case called the Bostock Case, which involved whether it involved LGBT rights, in particular transgender rights. And we were hoping that the Supreme Court would hold that transgender discrimination is discrimination based on sex. And so we were representing 40 law and history professors at various universities in collaboration with a couple of different NGOs that focused on LGBT rights, to try to just educate the court about the history of transgender rights, and the fact that that they should rule this way, and they actually did rule this way, which was very exciting for the underlying clients. Another similar kind of human rights, LGBTQ rights case was that we worked on the Daca case in the United States Supreme Courts a few years ago. And in that amicus brief, we worked with another LGBTQ NGO, and we were trying to demonstrate that there are of the tens of thousands of individuals, young people who had come to the United States and had this protection under this Daca system. Many of them were LGBTQ, and many of them would be sent back to their home countries and persecuted or even prosecuted because of the fact that they were LGBTQ. And so we were trying to kind of demonstrate, show the court that hopefully they would rule that the DACA program could stay on, so that these particular individuals wouldn't be injured when they were sent back home. I'll just talk a little bit about some of the systemic change work for the Access to Justice Commission. And you might say, what the heck is that? What is an Access to Justice Commission? And basically, there are commissions like the one in Massachusetts throughout various states in the United States, and even more broadly in other countries as well. And the reason why it arose as such an issue is that the court system in the United States was really developed over, hundreds of years, and those rules and those procedures were really to have two litigants in front of a judge, and both of those litigants, both of those people who are filing a lawsuit or defending against a lawsuit, were supposed to be represented by a lawyer. And many of our state courts here in Massachusetts and across the country are not represented by lawyers. And I'll give you three examples. One, in the housing context. Most people who are facing eviction cases in housing, having to leave their homes, many of them are not represented by a lawyer. As little as maybe 2 to 5% of those who are facing those cases, and so a lot of them are up against their landlords who are trying to get them out of the apartment, who are represented by a lawyer, and so it becomes this very unequal system. Likewise, in family law, a majority, upwards of 80%, have one person who's not represented. So it becomes very difficult for courts to try to impose these rules and regulations that lawyers understand and that judges understand, but most people do not understand. So it becomes very difficult for people to represent themselves. And the third example is in the consumer debt area, where people are being sued for having not paid back debt. And in those situations, 99% of those consumers are not represented by a lawyer, versus the financial institutions are 99% of the time represented by someone. And so if you think about these inequities in representation, that's really what the Access to Justice Commission is really trying to address. And so we think about trying to make sure that more lawyers are available to help people, that we develop rules and regulations that if you are going to represent yourself, are much more simple and easy to understand. We're also thinking about ways in which more pro bono lawyers can get involved to help. And we're also advocating for change in the court system. And this became something that was very important during the pandemic, because so many people were stuck in their homes without access to anything. Some people didn't have internet. Most people didn't have access to a lawyer. And they were trying to advocate on their own when the court building themselves were closed. And so it became very difficult. So we were working really hard with the court system to make sure that while the court buildings were closed, that the courts remained open and that people could access the courts and people understood that they could. So I think what I'll do is maybe I'll stop there, because I think I've talked enough and I'll turn it back over to Abigail and all of you to see if you have any questions.
Thank you, Sue. I'm speechless. I mean, you are the reason that we are trying to work so hard on social impact, because you've been doing so much work in your life, and really you are an inspiration for us. So thank you so much for sharing all of this amazing work that you were doing.
Thank you. Well, I'm so impressed by all of you. So if we all keep working on it, we'll hopefully change the world, make it a better place.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's the reason, right? Like trying to change the world for a better place. So can I ask you a question? We know that, well, you have dedicated your legal work almost entirely pro bono, and thought you've been able to help bring justice to people who probably wouldn't otherwise have resources or the ability to get it. So are there any particular reasons why you settle for this path? Like what moves you to do this amazing work?
Yeah, well, I have to say at the outset that I really have an unusual job, and I'm so grateful for that. I mean, I work at a big law firm that has a lot of resources, and I get to pick the cases that I work on. And so every day I get to kind of make decisions on how to allocate my time and where to spend time helping people, which really is kind of an unusual situation. So as I mentioned, like this type of job, like really wasn't around when I graduated from law school. And it's something that law firms across the world actually have really thought about being useful and helpful to them, like over the last 15 years or so. So I really feel really fortunate to be at a firm that understood that value proposition and kind of created this job for me. And so, I try to work hard every day to make sure that they understand that they made the right choice. But, it's really been great it's not just me doing the work. It's me calling people at my firm and saying, hey, are you willing to help on this project? I get to do that every day. And invariably, people want to help. I think sometimes people just don't know like how to do it and how to access things. And so that's sort of my job, is to making it easy for people to help other people. So I went to law school to make a difference, and I'm really grateful that I have the position now where I can not only help people myself, but also help others help people.
Well, thank you so much for that amazing response. If you fellows have any questions, please share it in the chat box, or you can also raise your hand so we can unmute you. And also, please share where are you from, your university, what SDG are you working on, so we can have more context. And I have another question. Well, as we do our social impact work while wrapping up our undergraduate degrees, there's always going to be that tug of war between wanting to create an impact and wanting to be successful in a corporate sense, like money-wise, business-wise, etc. So, did you experience this, and how did you navigate it to find a balance in your needs?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I did. The short answer is yes, I did have that struggle. I think, and it's okay to recognize that you have to make choices along the way, and and those choices might be different than what you thought that they were going to be. So I mentioned earlier, like I ended up going to the private sector of a law firm life when I graduated from law school, and I then clerked for a couple of judges. And I really wrestled with that. I really was thinking, I'm going to be selling out, going to a private law firm. But I realized that I had a lot of debt from my undergrad and my law school. And I really needed to make sure that I was able to pay off that debt. And so when I made the choice, I felt a little bit mixed about the whole thing, honestly. But I think it's because I kind of viewed it through law school as very black and white. But now I realize it's pretty gray. Like I went to the law firm, I learned how to be a great lawyer, hopefully. And I also was able to do a lot. I chose the law firm specifically because they gave back to the community, and they did a lot of pro bono work. And so I got a lot of great experience. And then I was able to leave later, right? And work at an NGO when I had paid off my debt, and I knew what I was doing. And I will mention, though, in terms of like when you asked the question about, business kind of and financially providing, I did take an 85% pay cut when I left the law firm to go do public interest. So that is it's a consideration, but I loved what I'm so glad I did. And I when I went to the NGO, as I mentioned, it was all women. It was mission driven. We were all there because we wanted to help sexual assault survivors. And there's something to be said for that. It was amazing. It was just an amazing experience. But then, Mintz offered me this amazing job now, which is this hybrid, right? So it's mission driven. I'm sort of like running an NGO, like within a big company. So, I think I definitely felt this tug of war. Particularly when I was in law school and then right after. But now I realize that like everything kind of leads to something else. And as long as you understand, like make the best of each experience and you're learning from it, then, and you get to the point like now where I kind of feel like this is where I should be and this is where I wanted to be, which is great.
Well, that's also an amazing response. So thank you so much, Sue. This is a more a personal question. Are you happy? Like if you were to retire now, Will you be satisfied what you did your best with what you had to bring justice to others?
Well, I guess the answer is yes. So I do feel really like I've been able to make a difference. Of course, there's always more to do though, right? So I'm not ready to retire yet. There's lots to do. But yeah, I really feel like I've been really fortunate to have these experiences and taken advantage of a lot of the as the years go on, you meet all different types of amazing people and keeping in touch with them. And then they later come back and say, can you help me? Like all of you, like you'll all get to know each other really well during your fellowship. And then, like in 10 years from now, 20 years from now, you're going to still be in touch with each other. And that's, to me, has been really incredible. Like that whole ability to continue to stay engaged with other people, doing other really interesting work. And, you'll get to know people really well, like through this fellowship. And then like later on, you'll be able to work with each other and collaborate on projects. And that's really what's been incredible about, continuing. Like today I have a meeting with the ACLU that I worked on with the travel ban about another lawsuit that they're thinking of bringing. And, I haven't worked with them in a while, but we worked together and we collaborated really well together. And we loved working together. And, when they call, of course, I'm going to take their call. And of course, I'm going to jump on it because I know it's going to be an impactful project.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much. I agree. When you find a work that fills your heart, you want to live for it. So you will never want to retire. So Karen, if you want to unmute yourself and ask the question, please feel free to.
Hey, Susan, my name is Karan. I am a Millennium Fellow from Amity University, Mumbai, India. And I'm truly inspired by the amount of pro bono work you've taken, considering the amount of resources it can drain, both on time and everything in between. My question was, while like pro bono work may provide a degree of, emotional fulfillment, and it may give you a lot of like exposure to more like vulnerable groups so that you can help them whenever they're in need of it. Do you feel as if it may have affected like your financial security and like your personal needs and also your personal life in general? And if so, how did you like approach this issue?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think the hardest thing that you highlight is the emotional toll that some of these cases take. Like it's working with traumatized individuals and getting to know them and their experience can really impact you emotionally. And I'm thinking of this one client I have from Cambodia who is on the list to be deported. And so I'm the person who's saving her from not getting deported. And I'm not sure I have an answer, honestly, for that. And I have to live with that, and that's really hard, and I've really worked for like 5 years to try to figure things out. And sometimes you don't have an answer, and that's kind of difficult too. But I will say, and then in terms of the financial piece, like I think that many people who work in NGOs do make the choice, like they there's that toggle of the financial considerations and then the emotional benefit that you're getting and you're feeling. And I've luckily in my job now, I can actually have a job that pays me well, but I'm also able to do really great work, which is unusual. I have to say it's unusual. But I, when I was at the Victim Rights Law Center, I, as I mentioned, I did take an 85% pay cut to do that job. And that was tough. It was really a tricky kind of situation. But, I think there are times in your life that you can do things and your career is very long. And I think that you can more easily now kind of move around and do different things at different phases in your life. And so when my kids were young, I chose to do one thing. And then when my kids were like in a different phase, like I chose to do another thing. And now my kids are in college and I have to pay for that, so you kind of have to like at different phases in your life on the financial side, you might have to make different choices. And sometimes it's based on the reality that like you have to, but there's always ways that you, even if you're choosing to do that as your primary job, there's always ways that you can do on the volunteer side. Or like starting a nonprofit on the side or whatever it is, like you're doing that now, you're kind of toggling between being an undergraduate and running your own kind of project, and so you're the types of people that will be able to do that really well, I think.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you so much for that lovely answer. So Hannah, if you're there, can you please unmute yourself and ask the question, and also introduce yourself and where are you from, etc.
Yeah, hi. I hope everyone can hear me. I'm Hannah. I am currently in California, so here in the United States. I go to UC Davis, University of California, Davis, and I'm working on SDG 13, which is climate action. I'm actually looking to go into the law field, so this was really, really interesting and a great talk to listen to. My question is just about navigating the loss in the legal field. I think you touched on this a little bit, but I know especially in really like these high intensity situations and these really impactful cases, it may be really hard to lose that case or to face a challenge in that case. So I was just wondering if you have any insight into how to like navigate that and just to overcome that.
That's a great question, because you're not always going to win, right? You're not always going to win. You might be on the right side, right, of justice, but you're not always going to win that case. And that's really hard to deal with, right? So I'll give you a more specific example of my experience down on the border. So the way that the framework that I was dealing with down on the border was that these individuals that I was helping represented were all mothers and children who had been detained. They had gone through the first screening mechanism and all had gotten negative responses, meaning they would be deported. Okay. And so under that, the reason why is many of them, like 95% of them under a prior administration would have been getting positives. But because of the last administration's really onerous regulatory framework, they were getting negatives. And so it was heartbreaking that they were getting these negative determinations just based on something that was really unjust. The second stage was they were able to appeal, and they were able to be represented by a lawyer in this hearing before a court, before a judge. But unfortunately, the way this worked was that the lawyer really had no role. So it was kind of a fake role as far as I'm concerned. So you basically, sometimes it was up to the individual judge whether they would even let you talk. And so I felt terribly because I was in these situations where the mothers and their children thought they were being represented by someone who actually could advocate. But at most, I was able to just summarize at the end. And at worst, I was not able to say anything. I felt like a prop, right? So, I'll be honest. So I had these situations where I had these moms and their kids who, many of whom were survivors of horrible rapes, horrible domestic violence situations, not understanding the system, thinking that I was their lawyer, really effective lawyer, but I couldn't do anything. And that was so frustrating because at the end of the hearing, it was really heart-wrenching. I think I lost every case that week. And every one of those women were woken up the next morning at 6 a.m. and put on a flight back to their home countries or sent back to Mexico on the Mexican border, wearing their garb from the detention facility. And they would be picked up by gangs in Mexico and suffering like horrendous, torture, perhaps. So it was really haunting. I was able to have one victory, which was basically the judge was trying to conduct the hearing in a language that my client did not understand. And he was trying to force her to continue to go through with the hearing by saying, well, we could have the hearing now and you could get a resolution, or you might be in detention in this prison for months and months and months. I can't guarantee of finding a translator for you. And so I told my client I tried to tell my client, because I didn't speak the specific language, but I tried to, gesture that she should wait for a translator because that was her due process right. And I was able to cite some Supreme Court case that I pulled out of nowhere, and I was able to advocate for her. And she was able to not get deported immediately. So that I felt like that was sort of a victory. So that was a depressing week. But I will say I came back really energized because I just felt like the system was horrible. It was so unjust. It was terrible. And so I gathered like 20 people from my firm, and we decided to help the legal aid organization that we were working with. And, for a year, we were working on helping them figure out ways of making sure that the women and the children wouldn't get separated, because that was the new technique. They were going to separate the women from the children by saying, they were trying to force the women to make a decision. You can separate from your child and your child can go free, or you can stay in detention for another year with them. What a horrible choice. What a terrible choice. So anyway, I was able to get my, that was a huge loss. Like that whole week, it was just heartbreaking. It was horrible. But I was able to channel that anger into really trying to help, with more systemic change, and continue to just work on all these other litigation matters that were kind of strategic in nature that could really make a difference. So I don't really have a really good answer in terms of it was awful. It's awful to feel like you are so powerless in a system that is really unfair, but you just have to keep fighting, right? And there are ways that you can fight, and there are ways that you can bring to bear resources that may not help those women and children, certainly did not help those women and children, but will help people in the future.
Thank you so much. That was really insightful.
Thanks. Good luck too. You're doing great work on climate change. That's awesome.
Thank you. So thank you so much. We have a little bit more time. So I see Felicia raising their hand. So please, can you unmute yourself, introduce yourself, where are you from, etc. Where are you working on?
Hello. Oh wait, I just turn on my camera? My question is kind of all around the place, so I didn't know how to put it in words. So my name is Felicia Marikakar. I'm from Japan. I'm a sophomore student. I think that's what they call it in America, a second year student. And
that's all good.
Yeah. And I'm interested in probably all of the SDGs, but maybe SDG number 1, no poverty. And my question is at the moment, this is kind of personal question, but at the moment I'm kind of at these crossroads where if I take a big step towards something, it could lead to a huge change for me and the people around me. But it's costly kind of, but if I do it and it succeeds, it'd be a major success. Mm-hmm. And then so I'm kind of afraid to take that first step, because I don't know what is at the other end of that. That's kind of scary for me, because I've never done something this big, so it's kind of scary. And I just wanted to know, have you ever done something that you're in retrospect, you're that was probably the best decision of my life, or I'm glad I took that first step?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think with every kind of challenge that you have, I think the only way that you can make a difference is to take that first step, even though it's really scary. Honestly, I don't know what I'm doing. I have to admit, I don't know what I'm doing most of the time, honestly. And I think but I've learned how to manage that terror, or that I don't know what I'm doing feeling, and sort of feel confident about it, or try to appear confident, even though when I take on a new case, do I know what I'm doing? No, but I have the skills like you, right, to try to make the right choice at the right time, And so I think sometimes, for example, when I decided to leave the firm and join this NGO, it felt like I was jumping off a cliff, honestly. But it was the best decision I made. I made amazing, I helped so many women and men who were survivors. I met amazing women who were doing the work. I'm still in touch with them. I'm still doing the work now. But it was a big decision to make that decision. So that's more of a macro life decision. The first examples were case. Do I take this case? And then thinking oh God, I don't even know what I'm doing. But I'll figure it out. I think you have to have confidence in yourself that you're going to make the right choice. And what's the worst thing that can happen, right? You made a wrong choice, and then you just take the step back again, So, but if you don't take that step, then you'll never figure out whether you could have made that difference, right? So I'm an advocate of thinking through things. You don't want to do things in a rash way, but like if you don't take that step, you're never going to make that change. And sometimes change is really hard personally. And sometimes it's hard for your community, like you noted, but, and sometimes you have to make incremental change. So sometimes you can think of ways of getting to that point without like making a huge step that's might fail. But maybe if you take little incremental steps, then you'll get to that point. It might take a little bit longer, but hopefully that helps. Does that help? Does that answer your question?
Yes. I guess have to just have like, it's going to work out. Like something's going to happen. Like just move forward kind of mindset.
And honestly, like it might not be exactly what you're thinking is going to happen, but something is going to happen. Right. And then you're going to either meet someone that's going to help you on your journey, or you're going to meet someone who says like, well, that wasn't very smart. Why don't you go over here instead? Like each of those points are going to be a learning opportunity for you. But if you don't do that step, it's never going to actually happen.
Yes, I agree. Thank you very much. Mm-hmm. I will take that first step.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Sue. That was very encouraging. And yeah, sometimes we are so afraid. But yeah, if we just take a step, then something should happen, right?
I will say, like, I often am given like phone calls, like that phone call, like come to the airport. I could have said, no, I'm having a good time at this party. Right. But if I hadn't done that, then, and gathered up all these people to go and fight, whatever, then I don't know, maybe have been the same outcome because other people would have showed up. But I think sometimes it's just a matter of saying yes and showing up. That is really important.
I will note that definitely. Thank you so much. And well, you already gave us an advice, but what evergreen advice would you give to Millennium Fellows working on their social impact projects, growing and learning together through the fellowship journey while also taking undergrad studies?
Yeah, I mean, I touched upon a couple of these things, but like I'd say you learn so much from each other. You're all doing these incredibly impressive projects, and I'm sure that you're facing a lot of the same challenges. And each of you have found something or many things that you're passionate about. So I think that it's really good to rely on your, the other Millennium Fellows to like kind of learn how they've been able to balance these things. Like, how do you balance doing this amazing work and do your undergraduate studies? It's going to be the same calculus that I'm facing every day, right? Like, so it's like, I want to have a balanced life. I want to be there for my family. I want to do really interesting volunteer work for like the court system and for Dartmouth. I want to make sure I still, do my job too. And then I also want to try to do some really interesting work that makes a difference in the world. And so it's always a question of prioritizing and balancing. And I learn best when I have other people that I can share with those experiences. Like, how do you balance it all? And I think the best way is to learn from each other. I think the other thing is to really network with people who are more senior to you too, and really take advantage of what other people mistakes people have made along the way, or what successes they've had along the way. And people, I've often found like, people who are more senior to me, like people always want to like talk about themselves and give you advice, right? And I would reach out to really interesting people who have taken really interesting career paths and just reach out to them. And invariably people will, speak to you, I think. At least that's been my experience. And then I guess the last is that like, I think it's really important to remember that you can't do this work alone. And that the only way that you can get things done effectively is this kind of concept of not just collaboration, but sustainable collaboration, where you're partnering with others, you're rolling up your sleeves with them, you're communicating, you're working out the obstacles. And even though that can be exhausting, it's the only way I think you can make change. So those are my three things.
Well, that was an amazing answer. So thank you so much. We also have a lot of good comments here, like
not all heroes wear capes, and we're just so amazed by you and your work and your amazing work. So you are such an inspiring leader, and such an incredible empathy that you showed to us today. So thank you so much. I don't know if you can share with us if there's any way that fellows can connect with you, or maybe sharing some questions before the session or anything. Sure. Maybe your email or anything.
Yeah. Do I put it in the chat, I think, right? Is that what I'm supposed to do? I think that's what my instruction was. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you so
I'll do that
much.
right now. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, it was so nice to speak with all of you today or tonight or last night or whatever night it is for you. And you're doing, I just have to say, like, again, how impressive you all are. And what an amazing group of people you get to spend time with in this fellowship year. So keep doing what you're doing, and thanks for letting me join you today.
Thank you so much. It was a really honor to meeting you today, and all of these amazing leaders that are also joining us. So thank you, all of you, for being with us, and have a lovely rest of your day, night, or wherever you are for. Please stay tuned so we can share with you more webinars. And if you have also more questions for Sue, she was awesome, so she shared her email. And thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for moderating too. All right, nice to see all of you. Take care.